If the Supreme Court draft opinion on abortion becomes the law of the land, abortion would essentially become a state-by-state issue. NBC News estimates at least 23 states would institute bans if Roe v. Wade is rolled back. 13 of them have trigger laws, which would ban abortion the moment Roe is struck down. One of those states, Louisiana, has arguably been trying to venture even farther against reproductive rights than any other. Last week, a Louisiana state representative named Danny McCormick introduced a bill that would charge women who have abortions with murder. He said, quote, "I look at the death of a preborn baby in the same way as if a mother kills her born child. To me, they are equal." The bill is so extreme, even groups that are traditionally against abortion, including the state's anti-abortion governor, the Louisiana Right to Life group, and the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops, oppose it. The bill was gutted Thursday night. State lawmakers passed an amendment that stripped the sections of the bill that would have restricted emergency contraception, IVF, and the provisions that would have punished people seeking abortions. It did seem like a tipping point of sorts on just how far even anti-abortion Republicans want to venture into the fight over reproductive rights. The Washington Post writes about how Republicans against the measure emphasize that the anti-abortion movement does not support imposing criminal charges against those who are pregnant. But the bill sponsor is still standing his ground. McCormick warned his colleagues they could not vote for the amendment and claim to be pro-life. He said, quote, "After this vote, your name will be written on one side of history or the other." But let's focus on McCormick for just a second. The Daily Beast writes he began a journey from fringe state legislator to national figure last week. Quote, "Figures like McCormick are increasingly poised to help set reproductive policy in America." And McCormick isn't just extreme in his views of reproductive rights. He's a fringe conspiracist. There are videos of him taking a blowtorch and a chainsaw to a mask when mask mandates were in effect in 2020. He's also been accused of making anti-Semitic claims. As McCormick continues to gain more recognition, there are others in Louisiana fighting against him and everything fringe conspiracy theorists like him stand for. That includes Louisiana State Representative Mandy Landry, who's one of the very few remaining pro-choice women in the Louisiana legislature. She told the Daily Beast abortion replaced segregation as the organizing force of the far right. Louisiana State Representative Mandy Landry joins me now. She just announced her plan to run for a state Senate seat. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's start with the big news about this bill being gutted. It shows that maybe there is a line even anti-abortion lawmakers aren't comfortable crossing. But is this really something worth celebrating? I mean, for me, it seems like a Pyrrhic victory, right? Because it's that the concept of anti-abortion laws are still going to continue to be in Louisiana.
It's not a celebration at all. It's a tentative hold. These are the people who stopped this momentarily, finally had a moment of embarrassment and realized that everything they had supported and encouraged might have gone a little too far and might affect their future campaigns or fundraising. It was all about self-preservation for most of the Republicans in the House, and it is not a win for women at all.
Representative, though, I want to kind of follow this line a little bit. The idea that the sections of the bill, right, that cut out the emergency contraceptives, the IVF, for example, do you think maybe those are the targeted issues that need to be focused to be able to convince people like Republican voters that if they were to vote for a Republican who would support that type of concept, that they'd be voting against those types of privileges or rights that they'd want to be able to exercise?
I mean, Shirley, when you bring up any issue that affects wealthier people or white women, of course, it calls attention to that. There's all these newfound infertility warriors who are supporting the cause, and I'm so happy to have them here. But I hope they realize that attacks on anyone's decision on what they want to do with their family is an attack on them. And just because they might be momentarily removed from a piece of legislation now doesn't mean that they're safe in the future. I really hope all these women and families who finally realize that they're in danger too will expand their newfound activism to everyone in the state, especially the poor.
It appears, though, that you are on a little bit of an island by yourself in Louisiana as one of the only pro-choice state representatives. Your state has one of the worst maternal mortality rates in the United States. What is your specific plan to push forward in your fight to give women the right to choose? I note that as a lawyer, you've actually represented abortion and IVF clinics in your state. Does that inform your decisions in terms of how you want to make progress in Louisiana?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why I ran. I was just so disgusted with the fact that there wasn't even one person vocally protecting those views, especially in the state house. You know, it's not just about voting a certain way. It's about being public and educating our legislators, because a lot of them don't even understand basic issues of reproduction. We need more women and pro-choice people in office to help explain these issues. I mean, what I'm going to do is what I've been doing this whole time. I focus on maternal health issues. Louisiana was the first state to expand a new Medicaid provision that extends Medicaid from 60 days to 1 year. That's because I was elected, because I filed a bill and I worked with dozens of women over the last year to get that passed. It matters who we vote for, and it doesn't, it's not just how someone votes, but it's what they do when they're in office. And look, I'm not gonna revert 30 years of extremist laws in my state, but I can bring attention to the issue, and I can do what I can while I'm elected to help women's health.
Along that vein, you said in that Daily Beast article that abortion replaced segregation as the organizing force of the far right. But, is it possible then, Representative, that we're at the point where you're going to have to do a grassroots push to be able to focus now on women versus maybe a bigger spread of potential voters to be able to convince them to, for example, elect you to the state Senate?
I mean, women are 51% of voters in the state. They're actually 55% of the Senate district that I'm running for. And I'm glad you brought that up for the reason that we have 5 female senators in our state right now, and every one of them is very loudly and publicly anti-choice. And it makes it that much harder for any Democrat to support choice policies. It's frustrating to see so many women in the state push bills and policies that help oppress other women, especially women who are Black or brown or poor. But the only way to fight back against that is to elect people with the opposing viewpoint. And that goes for all levels of government, from governor on down. And it's up to voters who unfortunately are just drowned in messaging from the Family Forum, from the Right to Life, from extremist groups. They're winning, and that's all of our fault.
Louisiana is the only state in the Deep South with a Democratic governor, John Bel Edwards. He's against abortion, though. That didn't stop him from coming out against the anti-abortion bill that was being pushed by McCormick. What do you wish your governor would do next when it comes to reproductive rights? Do a 180 on all the views that he's propounded and everything he signed. It was hard for me to support him as governor because I think he's at fault for a lot of the harm women have faced since he's been elected. But in Louisiana, sometimes you have to choose between the lesser of two evils, as we say. And it's really hard, and it has been really hard to work with him. I'm glad he finally felt a bit of worry and concern and shame over this proposed bill, that it was going too far. But, it's so-called moderates like him in my own party and in the Republican Party that are the reason that we even have to get to this point in the first place. And I just really hope that he has been thinking hard about this and realized that some of what he has encouraged due to his personal religion has done a lot of harm and has brought us to where we are now. State Representative Mandy Landry, keep on fighting that good fight in Louisiana. We see you, we hear you, and we thank you for being here today.
I appreciate you so much.